And now it's time for our second session, which will now focus on the growth of the illegal betting market and tackling challenges in betting regulation. We will explore what this means for racing's future, examining tighter government controls on gambling, advertising restrictions, and of course affordability checks, which are changing the landscape for racing. Again, we will have short presentations from our speakers, followed by a Q&A. Very shortly, we will hear from the acting CEO of the British Horse Racing Authority, Brant Dunshea, who's held senior roles in racing, both in Britain and Australia. We'll hear from Tom Chignell, who has spent more than 2 decades in sports integrity investigations and intelligence and is now consultant on integrity projects for the Hong Kong Jockey Club and a member of the IFHA on anti-illegal betting and related crime. We'll also hear from Luca Esposito, who has a deep understanding of sports betting and achieving sports integrity, and he is now Executive Director of the World Lottery Association. And joining the panel for the question and answer session will be Vincent Venn, who is a sports lawyer and Head of Integrity at FIFA before joining UEFA in 2020, where he is Head of Anti-Match Fixing. But first, we will hear from the Chair of the IFHA Council on Anti-Illegal Betting and Related Crime, Martin Perbrick, who has been Director of Security and Travel Safety for McKinsey & Co. and Director of Security and Integrity for the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And he will also conduct the Q&A session with the panel. Martin, it's all yours.
Chairman and delegates, I really must start off by thanking the Secretary-General, I think, because I hope he's here. He's left the room, actually, for the thanks, because usually he puts me straight on after lunch when, as Rishi found out, most people haven't come back. So I sympathize with our friends from Saudi Arabia, and thank you for taking the post-lunch spot. The last time that happened was in Korea, I think, at the Asian Racing Conference, and in the post-lunch spot, I think there were about 3 people in the room, rather a large room, and one of them was Winfried, of course, who's always the first person back in the room. So thank you, Andrew. And thank you very much to the IFHA and the Chairman for scheduling this session. I know they hear a lot from us, and we've been talking about this subject for many years. And I think it's fair to say that we've been proven quite right in what we've been saying for the past 15 years, and also very much what Winfried's been saying. I hope some of you might see an article in a racing publication called Idle Horse in the past week when Winfried talks about when he first saw the scale of illegal betting in Hong Kong. And I remember those days, going back to the bad old days, especially before sports betting, football betting was legalized in Hong Kong. It was literally every single pub that you walked into, there was a book being run. So those were different times and things have changed. But conversely, these illegal markets have grown globally, and much of the work we do for the IFHA is explaining how that's happened and trying to explain, especially to policymakers in Europe and the Americas, why it's important for them. But I think we also need to continue to remind people in racing administration, in racing authorities, why it's important for racing as a sport as well. And this afternoon, my colleagues from the IFHA Council and Vincent from UEFA will do so. Rishi's done a very good job of introducing them. Perhaps I can just also say why each one of them will talk about something and how it relates to racing. So Brant, of course, CEO of the British Horse Racing Authority, is in the middle of a live-time situation trying to manage government policymakers, gambling regulators, and educate them about how they can not perhaps regulate and tax a sport out of existence, but really regulate its demise if they act incorrectly. So it's really a real-time example for all of us of how this happens. Tom Chignell, who I've known since he was with the British Horse Racing Authority and came to work with us in Hong Kong later, has been conducting bet monitoring for several decades, as Rishi said, but he's also understanding more at the moment about how crypto betting is affecting betting markets, and I'll speak a little bit about that shortly. So Tom will talk about crypto betting and the rise of new forms of betting, for example, prediction markets, which we'll also say something about. Luca from the WLA, World Lottery Association, which operates United Lotteries for Integrity in Sports. So the name, I think, is always a bit misleading, Luca, World Lottery Association. you have a lot of members, and I think almost all of them, probably 80% plus, are engaged in sports betting somehow. So the platform they operate, ULIS, United Lotteries for Integrity in Sports, monitors 30 different sports. So it's an extremely sophisticated platform, and it's from an organization whose members must have a charitable purpose. And I think that's quite distinct from the large bookmaking and betting operation entities in the world. And Vincent, of course, I think UEFA is the leader in football integrity. I will say nothing about your former employer, Vincent, but you left them behind, obviously, but really you'll hear why UEFA is a role model for this. I just want to highlight 3 key reasons why we talk about illegal betting. Integrity, gambling harm, and tax. I should add regulation and over-regulation to tax. Sorry, that's a little bit of an echo, I think. Integrity, because illegal betting markets are where the threats to integrity in racing take place. And in other sports, I should add as well. It's not so much the markets that we monitor, the markets that are regulated. It's those unregulated, unmonitored markets where integrity threats are based and there's corruption in sport. Gambling harm, I think we have to increasingly convince regulators and government policymakers that there is, without a doubt, greater risk of gambling harm to consumers in illegal markets. And it's surprising to see that many policymakers and regulators don't think the same way and equate illegal and legal markets the same. And tax and regulation, obviously, it's a critical moment for tax in most of our countries, unfortunately, where government is trying to raise tax. And I think all of these components eventually have a financial impact on racing. And we heard earlier, I think, something about the ripple effect, which I thought was very interesting, a very interesting expression. The ripple effect on trainers, breeders, tourism. There's a ripple effect from illegal betting as well throughout racing. So I think in summary, illegal betting markets threaten horse racing, and I think that's important to bring this back to horse racing, by draining funding, which we're seeing in the UK at the moment because of the levy and the threat to the levy, enabling corruption, illegal, unmonitored, unregulated markets, and eroding confidence amongst fans and the public. And that happens quite slowly, but there's a tipping point in the confidence of the public and fans in a sport, and then it becomes quite sudden how that confidence disappears. So if I could just say something about the situation, without going into great depth, but just with reference to some of our publications, and please do go and read them. In the past 5 years, I think we've seen a turning point in all gambling throughout the world, not just betting on racing and other sports. It's a turning point in consumer behavior. And that turning point largely came from COVID-19. So during COVID-19, we all know what happened during that period. Large numbers of people were confined to homes, confined to the cities or places where they lived, and didn't go into the same leisure activities that they normally went into. There was a surge in rates of online betting around the world, despite there being a dip during COVID in sports competitions, although there are a number of sort of informal sports competitions that replaced some of the major competitions that were lost. Belarus, for example, managed to keep running soccer when most of the world stopped, but that's Belarus. Of course, so I think from this we see gambling is a constantly changing activity, and it's not just that gambling is changing, it's changing because consumer preferences are changing. I think we've somewhat seen that this morning from the presentations about why racing should evolve and change to meet consumer demand. Consumer demand for gambling products is also changing very quickly and was driven by the COVID-19 pandemic. So this evolution of gambling can face a shock, and COVID-19 was a shock that changed that behavior quite quickly. As well as this change in gambling habits, change in betting habits are being driven by COVID-19, we also have changes in technology that are, I think it's fair to say, moving more quickly than most of us can comprehend. And that's affecting gambling markets, the delivery of gambling products, and the nature of gambling products as well. So why then are consumers moving to illegal betting in many markets? As Winfried said, I think our research has shown they're certainly moving more quickly to illegal betting than they are moving to certain legal betting products. And the reason is, typically, for any gambling operator will tell you, price and product. Better prices and products in illegal markets. Tax does have an impact on that, which we need to convince government regulators of. The use of cryptocurrencies. One professional player in a very large syndicate told me that almost 100% of betting on cricket in India, which is pretty much illegal, is settled in cryptocurrency. So that's already a huge illegal market in itself, and almost 100% of that market is settled in cryptocurrency. The volumes there are staggering. We're talking, for that cricket market only, probably several $100 billion a year. And I think thirdly, why consumers are migrating to illegal markets in most jurisdictions is they can gamble and bet whilst they're self-excluded. And that sounds counterintuitive. Consumers wish to self-exclude themselves from a gambling product or from a gambling platform, but it does become an addiction or an addictive habit. So those illegal market operators that don't have GamStop in the UK or any of the exclusion measures that licensed regulated betting operators have will simply switch from the legal market to the illegal market when they wish to. And actually the Gambling Commission, I think, recently acknowledged that in the UK. And I think I'm pleased to say they issued a report about the migration of consumers to the illegal market. They did say they shouldn't call it the illegal betting because that was, consumers might get quite upset about it. I think that's not quite the point we've always stressed, that we have to educate consumers that they may not be doing something illegal in the jurisdiction you're in. It may be the operator in the UK, for example. But by going into that market, you are entering an illegal market. It's important for consumers to understand that. I will say something about, before my Laffer curve, which I like, I will say something about 3 key things I think that are changing gambling markets. So firstly, from the report on the left, pseudo-regulators. So when I wrote the report in this document, which you'll see on regulation of betting, unfortunately it's out of date already. That's the danger of analog pump publications. But the report on the left is on the IFHA website already. So I wrote in this report with about a dozen offshore gambling regulators, or pseudo-regulators as I call them. Alderney, Anjouan, Antigua, Barbuda, Curacao, Gibraltar, Isle of Man, Kanawaki, which is a Mohawk reservation in Canada, Malta, Panama, the Philippines, Vanuatu. The list in the new report is already over 20. So that offshore gambling pseudo-regulation is developing quickly, and that's one of the key drivers for illegal betting markets around the world, that regulators project to consumers that they are regulated, they are licensed, but these are pseudo-licenses and they're not real licenses. And secondly, I think, as we highlighted in February 2025, consumers are changing their preferences. Many sports and some gambling operators don't react to those changes in preferences very quickly. And I think, again, we heard this morning how we need to understand consumer preferences better. And those changes in consumer preferences driven by huge amounts of access to data on sports, but also politics, entertainment, financial markets, and we're seeing that through the growth of prediction markets. Initially in the US, where they're not licensed as gambling operators, but prediction markets are licensed as financial services firms. But I'm glad to say, I think Polymarket is deemed illegal in France. The gambling regulator here, the ANJ, said after the election of President Trump that Polymarket, where there was a significant surge of betting on President Trump to win, which I did not take part in, I stress, that actually that activity is gambling. It's very good to see the French authorities coming out and calling it that, which the US authorities are not. And I think there's a large debate about what that means. But Polymarket, Kalshi, Robinhood, these financial services platforms are not only selling predictions of the next US president or various other bets, but also racing and other sports. And bookmakers are now migrating towards them to change their products as well. And then thirdly, technology. So as I mentioned, cryptocurrency is a key driver of consumers betting with illegal markets because more and more consumers want to bet with crypto and use crypto generally. So that's a parallel growth of the use of crypto in our society. We do have a report that's not yet published on this. Doug Robinson, who's here, and Doris Mao did the research for that. But I'll just give a highlight of what they're saying in this report when it's published, I think, next week. So 43% of the world's most popular illegal betting websites now accept cryptocurrency deposits. So we took, or Doug and Doris took, the top 100 by traffic illegal betting websites around the world, and 43% of them accept cryptocurrency deposits. That's up from 2024, when only 25% of them accepted cryptocurrency deposits. So there's this surge of growth in the use of cryptocurrency in illegal markets. At the same time, looking at the largest legal licensed betting operators in the world, 5% of them are offering cryptocurrency betting and funding. So there's this huge difference with this surge in the growth of cryptocurrency, which doesn't come from nowhere. It's consumers who are saying, I want to use cryptocurrency for various reasons. But the legal market, I'm not saying the legal market should adopt cryptocurrency, but it is not, and the illegal market will surge because of this. So there are a variety of risks around that, and I think that the biggest risk is that it's not regulated. So lastly, the Laffer curve. I think most people, it's fair to say there's an 80-20 rule here. If you'd asked perhaps 5 years ago who knew what a Laffer curve was, 80% of people would say not. Probably now only 20% of people would say they don't know what a Laffer curve is. And that's because all of our societies, certainly in Europe and North America, are experiencing great stress with our government seeking to collect more tax. And that does have an impact not only on those of us in the middle class who are increasingly squeezed, but also on gambling and betting as well. So I think it's fair to say that the changes that I just highlighted in technology, in the nature of gambling markets, are leaving regulators in the dust. They don't quite know what's happening or why it's happening, and they can't keep up with that. But at the same time, there are increases in tax or proposals to increase tax in many countries on betting, on gambling, as part of a general increase in taxation, certainly in Western Europe. And there's also an increase in regulation, or over-regulation, as we would put it. So just to give you an example of this, how I think the thinking on it is misguided. A think tank in the UK, in the past 2 weeks, published a paper with a variety of tax improvement measures, but focused partly on gambling, proposing that remote gaming duty in the UK increase from 21% to 50%, excluding racing, I should add. And machine gaming duty increased to 50% as well. They are dreaming if they think this does not have an impact on consumer behavior. It firstly has an impact on the behavior of betting companies. Obviously, the cost to the betting company of delivering those products increases. The takeout rate inevitably increases, which means the payout rate decreases. And consumers are not stupid. As soon as they start to win less frequently, as soon as they start to win less, they'll change their behavior. It's very unlikely they will stop betting or gambling, but they go to alternative channels. So I think the Laffer curve is now critical for governments to understand in relation to gambling markets and how it affects consumers. If you take one thing back to your own jurisdiction, please could you make it the Laffer curve and talk to your policymakers about it, because it's about to have an impact on all of us, I think. So I shall stop there with the Laffer curve, not the most interesting part of the day perhaps, but and hand over to Brant Dunshay to talk us through what's happening in the UK. Brant, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I feel much better for knowing that we've had a Laffer curve today. And it saves me mentioning it. Sorry, gone one too far there. I want to thank the IFHA for the opportunity to speak today, and the foresight to establish the IFHA Council on Anti-Illegal Betting and Related Crime back in around 2017. These problems that we're dealing with today were identified by originally the Asian Racing Federation and that council when it was initially established. And so some 7-8 years on, in some respects, it's pleasing that that work that has been done is now starting to be recognised by governments and policymakers the world over. The growth in illegal, unregulated betting markets is, alongside ensuring that we prioritise the welfare of our horses, protecting our social licence to operate, and doing all we can to understand what consumers of the future want from us as a sport, it is one of the single biggest threats we face. And my message today in this short presentation is very simple. Interventions by governments and gambling regulators across the globe, whilst often taken with very good intentions, are leading to unintended consequences which are directly to the detriment of our sport. And so it is incumbent on every person in this room and everybody watching on the live stream representing a racing authority or racing club to understand the issues and align with us to help inform decision making and decision makers, whether they be government officials, politicians, or others across our racing ecosystem, of what is happening. So let me try to explain. The cornerstone of financially sustainable and commercially viable horse racing is to ensure there is a healthy, well-regulated, legal betting market. A market that offers competitive pricing and an engaging consumer proposition. Government policy decisions directly shape the dynamics of betting markets. They have profound impacts and consequences for our sport. Sometimes these policy decisions will be taken with the intention of supporting racing ecosystems, and we do see good examples of this. Breeder premiums, forms of tax relief in different countries for participants. However, when it comes to policy relating to betting, these decisions are more often than not perhaps poorly thought through without regard for the unintended consequences. We've seen over recent years a combination of global fiscal and regulatory pressures lead to a wide range of government interventions, including things like the introduction of financial risk affordability checks, increasing rates of taxation on betting on racing, anti-money laundering regulations. And these are driving consumers away from regulated markets, encouraging the migration of bettors to these unregulated, illegal markets, which do not contribute to revenues back to our sport, lead to a decrease in taxation returns back to governments. They compromise integrity and offer no protections for vulnerable consumers, and Martin's covered some of those points already. Therefore, it is essential that we collectively understand the impacts so that we can engage with policymakers and help them understand it's crucial for the survival of our sport. Our sport maintains its social licence to operate by ensuring that we have modern and progressive integrity measures in place. And similarly, we must prioritise investment in equine and human welfare. And this all depends on a financially sustainable sport. Betting regulation should ensure protections are in place for consumers, promote the integrity of the betting propositions and our racing product, and it should generate sustainable taxation revenues for governments. A well-regulated legal betting market supports our integrity, finances our sport, and builds public trust to protect our social licence to operate. Increasingly, we've been observing a regulatory disconnect and unintended consequences globally, as already articulated by Martin. To help contextualise the impacts of this disconnect, let us briefly consider our recent experiences in Britain. Over recent years in Britain, we've seen government recommend the introduction of affordability or financial risk checks intended to protect vulnerable consumers. And absolutely that is an appropriate policy position to take. The UK Gambling Commission have been piloting now for some time what have been referred to as frictionless checks, facilitated through credit reference agencies. But they've had an impact. Combining this with consumer feedback that bettors account restrictions by operators have continued, we've seen betting turnover in Britain effectively in freefall over recent years, down 16.3% over the last 2 years, and that's before adjustment for inflation during that particular period. Despite the impacts of this, earlier this year the government announced a consultation proposing that taxes on general betting duties, so racing and sports, currently taxed at 15%, be harmonised with remote gambling tax. So that's the taxes on online casino slots, games of chance, etc., which is currently taxed at 21%. Independent economic analysis has revealed that should the British government adopt this proposed policy position, it would put 2,700 jobs at risk and cost our sector in Britain around £66 million in revenues in the first year alone. To help us in Britain gain a greater understanding of the impact of interventions and the growth of illegal, unregulated betting markets relevant to our circumstances in Britain, earlier this year the IFHR Council on Anti-Illegal Betting and Related Crime undertook research to examine the growth of traffic from UK consumers to unlicensed betting websites. This work involved using software to analyse changes in the volume of website traffic to both legal, UK Gambling Commission regulated betting operators, and more than 20 non-UK licensed betting sites between 2021 and 2024. This work revealed that since 2021, and I recall Winfred actually referenced this in his opening address, the number of unique visits to 22 non-UK licensed betting sites, which takes bets on British racing, grew by 522% to over 600,000 unique visits per month between January and September 2024 alone. That work has been incredibly helpful for us, and we thank the Council for that research to help inform our understanding. So I've just given a brief overview of our experience and challenges in Britain, but we're not alone. This is a global phenomenon. Look at the Netherlands. Gambling taxes earlier in 2025 increased from 34.5% from 30.5%. This shortly after the introduction of affordability checks. This is, of course, intended to increase government revenues, but this has resulted in lower tax yields following migration across the black markets. Austria, another one of our European nations, this year online gaming duty increased from 40 to 55%. Growing evidence there highlights that this is driving rapid growth to black markets where customers have fewer protections. And earlier today, I was discussing with some of our colleagues here from India their experiences. After increases in goods and services tax in 2017 on wagering on horse racing, government revenues more than halved in 5 years as a result. Just last month, the GST, the goods and services tax, was increased further from 28% to 40%, following the impacts already experienced. This will have a catastrophic impact on the horse racing sector in India. But it goes on. Other examples across Europe, for example, the prohibition on racecourse cash bets and limiting account betting to those with national identity numbers to protect against money laundering is a growing trend across some European racing nations. This in itself doesn't stop money laundering, and these are the messages we need to communicate. In fact, last year at the European and Mediterranean Horse Racing Federation, we held our General Assembly in conjunction with the Danish Breeders' Cup. Due to these sorts of restrictions that I've just articulated, none of the 100-odd delegates from across Europe and some from further afield in attendance could have a bet. I'm not quite sure how that type of government policy is a good thing for anyone, let alone our sport. The examples, they go on and on. So, what can we do to deal with these challenges? Some of you will have noticed the nuance today in my language. When referring to horse racing, I've referred to it as a sport throughout this presentation. In my view, this is an important message that we need to communicate to policymakers. Yes, we are a global industry, but at our core, we're a sport. And we support communities, jobs, and wonderful causes the world over. And we must get better at communicating that message. In Britain this year, we decided to launch a campaign to help the government understand why racing is different from other forms of gambling and why the proposal to harmonise gambling taxes was not a sensible policy position. The Axe the Racing tax campaign has had incredible cut-through, and I'm sure many in this room today will have seen evidence of that campaign through social media or other media sources. The government asked us to respond to this particular consultation ahead of the autumn budget, which we'll learn more of next month in November. We did. We continue to engage with government decision makers on this, and our message has been very clear. Racing is different. And for all the wonderful benefits that our sport, including jobs, we bring to communities, from a taxation perspective, we must be treated differently to other forms of betting. We must all align and work together to understand these issues and inform policymakers of these threats. At our recent Day of Action we held 2 weeks ago at Westminster, I used a short video to help share that understanding. And just before we close my address with this short video, I would like to thank our colleagues at York Racecourse, home of the 2024 Longines World's Best Race, for working with us to develop this short video presentation. So I'll stand to the screen.
Racing is a sport that means so much to so many.
It provides jobs, it provides entertainment, and a great source of pride.
It's a huge part of people's lives. It's their livelihood and their passion.
It's a big family community, and for anybody to sort of take this away, what's the future hold? I feel very sad about it at the moment.
It's not just what happens on the day, it's a large community. Local businesses all rely on the yard.
We've been selling pies for 3 generations without the sales here at York Racecourse. As a small individual business, it would take away a lot for us.
We would lose our busiest days of the year, which would be significant.
The British racing and breeding industry is a worldwide success story. a huge spectator sport with massive international investment into the country.
The horses are fantastic. It's that feel, that whole buzz.
Brings a lot of revenue to the area.
Horse racing isn't just a job, it is my life.
All I ever know is racing.
And it truly is life-changing.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the invite to speak today. I apologise for my croaky voice. I put it into ChatGPT this morning. How do I solve a croaky voice? It said, don't speak. So, betting disrupted, cryptocurrencies, prediction markets, and the threat to the integrity of sports and racing. A global betting revolution is taking place. It's taking place beyond the traditionally well-established, well-regulated betting markets. It is being driven by social media and cryptocurrencies. Prediction markets have taken off. They've taken off in the United States, but their impact will be felt globally. Illegal market betting accounts are now easier to access, fund, and withdraw from, all because of cryptocurrencies. The integrity and reputation of racing and sports are at risk, as is that traditional funding model through betting levies. I'm just going to make a comparison now between what's been happening in those well-established traditional betting markets, and I'm going to use the UK as an example, and then compare with what's happening offshore in those cryptocurrency markets and in the United States. So in the UK, in recent years, there's been increased compliance checks, regulatory costs on betting operators. Now in the UK, they're mainly made up of fixed odds operators. Customers who want to bet on racing have faced intrusive affordability checks. These customers as well have faced severe account restrictions placed on them by fixed odds betting operators. And these account restrictions have been placed because those operators want to protect their margin. But it's not a case of you can get £100 on a horse, you can get £50 on a horse, you can get £10 on a horse. It's just not the case. A lot of people are being told they're allowed 12 pence on a horse. And just to put this into context, the UK Gambling Commission are aware of this. They conducted research this year and identified that 650,000 active accounts had encountered some sort of restriction. The Racing Post, Big Punter survey earlier this year, identified that almost 1 in 3 gamblers had faced some sort of account restriction. The customer experience for those wanting to bet on UK racing has deteriorated. Where is the aspiration to solve the difficult puzzle solving who's going to win a horse race if after a week you've done too much research and you can't get a bet on? It's not a case of these customers are winning money. A lot of them, a large percentage of them, are actually losing money, but they're just not losing enough, and therefore they are being restricted. So finding out, I think the challenge for the UK betting industry is to come up with a solution. How do we deal with accepting winners? How can we still, not just winners, but those who aren't losing enough? And there's no easy answer at the moment, but that is the challenge there. They need to come up with that answer to get people involved in horse racing, to give people a chance. I'm talking about the everyday punter who bets in a pub on a Saturday. So British racing turnover is down, in real terms, accounting for inflation, by about 25% in 2023-24. How does that compare then to what's going on in the crypto space? Well, cryptocurrencies, according to the Financial Times, they quoted, had 81.4 billion gross gaming revenue in 2024. Now that's made up, the cryptocurrency betting market is made up by gaming, sportsbooks, fixed odds, and we've seen a little bit of emergence of cryptocurrency betting exchanges, which we'll come on to. You can use cryptocurrencies to actually fund some, but not all, prediction markets. Prediction markets technically offer lay betting, but they will brand it as a back bet or a sell bet, but it's very much a traditional back and lay bet. Prediction markets and these types of major cryptocurrency sportsbooks are accommodating all types of gambler, whether professional money, whether recreational money. The money is flowing in, particularly the younger demographic. It's being targeted by cryptocurrency sportsbooks, and they're driving that adoption to these types of operators. But what's happened to the money? That 25% in real terms on British racing. Is it true to say these gamblers have suddenly stopped betting? Or is this money now being channeled across to the illegal market, such as the Racing Post investigation identified last year with the WhatsApp bookmaker? And we're going to really come on to cryptocurrencies now. So what's the cryptocurrency effect on racing generally, global racing? Well, cryptocurrency sportsbooks mainly promote sports betting. However, not all of them take that approach. This is not an exhaustive list. This list, though, highlights cryptocurrency operators who do have a focus on racing, global racing. All of these, bar one, offer fixed odds on global horse racing. The first one on the screen is a company called MBET, who claim to be the world's #1 crypto horse racing book. They've been around for many, many years now. It's quite difficult to find where they're licensed if you go on their website. The one below that is a very established sports book. They claim to be the best sports book for horse racing, offering global horse racing betting markets at fixed odds. The one below, 1xBet, features quite heavily in the JOSMA journalist articles. They offer fixed odds on racing, as does sportsbet.io in the middle, Curacao licensed at the time, and have done exactly the same. The one on the right is quite an interesting innovation. This holds a licensed, it holds an Irish license and an Anduan license, something of which I think Martin might be able to offer some comment on. But they're currently not offering horse racing, but have said, and their website's currently under some renovation, they've said as soon as their technology allows, they will offer horse racing. That's the plan. And they've also said they've got some business relationships with some Asian-facing operators who already have exchange liquidity. So when that takes off, that's going to be very interesting for horse racing. Okay, so I'm just going to provide an insight into a major cryptocurrency betting operator. We conducted some research, 86 hours, across 12 different days, looking at bets actually going through this single cryptocurrency operator. I think what made this research of interest was you could actually see bet level data. We could see the bets going through. And a little bit of background to this operator. This operator very much targets that younger demographic. He uses social media influencers, live streamers, high-profile celebrities, sports sponsorships, all focused on that younger audience. It's not the traditional racebook from the 1990s. The average turnover was large. It was in excess of $9 million a day, which is big for a fixed odds sportsbook. Recreational base, 50% of bets were under $5. However, it did accommodate that large gambler because 24 bets in that 86-hour period were well in excess of 100,000. Most of them were on football, soccer, while 6 were on esports. Football had the largest amount of turnover, followed by esports. Basketball was big, tennis, cricket, and possibly quite worrying for the future of racing, just accounted for 1%. In terms of currency, the stablecoin USD Tether accounted for 51% of those bets going through that one website. Bitcoin was 13%. Interestingly, though, the Indian rupee accounted for 8% of total turnover, but 38% of total bets placed in that monitoring period were placed in Indian rupees, suggesting they might be taking bets from Indian nationals, which, if they were, would of course be defined as illegal betting, as if you follow the definition of the Council of Europe's Macallan Convention. Further IFHA research on this one website identified that 99% of the traffic is from jurisdictions where it holds no license. But let's talk about horse racing. So 86 hours, more than 5,000 bets were actually placed on horse racing. And even though it was 1% of the turnover, it made up $100,000 on a daily basis. It took bets across 14 different jurisdictions, with Hong Kong, Japan, Australia, and the UK being the largest in terms of turnover. But I think, as pointed out by Brant earlier, when we're looking at these operators, it's very unlikely that any of that $100,000 is going to benefit racing in any way. It's very unlikely that any local taxes are going to be paid, product fees, media rights, levies. In fact, all this operator is doing is posing a direct threat to the well-regulated, licensed betting market. There's very little evidence to suggest that this operator as well is reporting on suspicious betting. So if you're a jockey, you go and bet on this website, might be in breach of the rules of racing, but it's highly unlikely that they're going to be able to report that to the regulator, so posing an integrity threat as well. So I'm just going to spin around a bit and have a look at a major prediction market operator. So as Martin touched upon, prediction markets are actually marketed as event contracts and regulated by the US Commodities Future Trading Commission, but they operate very much like a traditional betting exchange with customer-to-customer trading, betting or trading on binary outcomes. For example, will Paris Saint-Germain win the Champions League? Will a horse win this race? Yes or no, back or lay, buy or sell, as they brand it. But offers a wide range of markets, with politics, crypto events such as the daily price of Bitcoin being big. Sport is now growing significantly and will continually be targeted by these prediction markets. Some operators accept cryptocurrencies, not all, but the market leaders, as Martin mentioned, include Kalshi and Polymarket, reportedly who have had direct or indirect relationships with Donald Trump Jr. in the past, so politically well positioned in the United States. Crypto.com, Sporttrade, Robinhood, and FanDuel have now expressed an interest, even though I don't think they've got anything set up at the moment. But they're owned by Flutter, of course own Betfair. So it'll be very interesting for horse racing going forward if there's any potential commingling between the horse racing on the Betfair exchange with a potential prediction market. So we looked at a fairly short period of time, but I think it provided a real true reflection as to what's going on with a single prediction market operator. So this by no means covering the entire market, just one operator, a few days of monitoring, totaling 36 hours. So in that 36-hour period, there were more than 500,000 trades recorded, so 235 trades on average per minute. Total turnover was $126 million bet in a 36-hour period. Now, this is slightly out of date because I think one prediction market recently has recorded approximately $250,000 in a single day's trading. There were 1,304 unique events, betting markets, were offered in that 36-hour period. Where was the money? Well, with this operator, the highest amount of turnover in that 36 hours was actually bet on the federal interest rate decision In June, 16 million. US military action against Iran before July, 10 million in a 36-hour period bet. The very important market of Elon Musk's number of tweets in a single week attracted 5 million. But if you look down, number 6, number 7, and number 10, we're on to sport. And sport, as I said, is only getting bigger. So political markets accounted for 12% of turnover. Crypto markets, 25%, such as the price of Bitcoin on a daily basis. The Israel-Iran conflict, 13% of the turnover. Sports on this one operator was 25% of the turnover, but I know that actually is bigger generally across this industry. 31,000 unique accounts traded during that recorded period, and the top 20 accounts accounted for 25% of total turnover, suggesting a large amount of professional investment going through this one operator. The World Pool races were offered. We've got several races from Royal Ascot, albeit to fairly small amounts of turnover, but they're beginning to be offered. We saw in the United States, we saw the Belmont, the Preakness, the Kentucky Derby. That turned over 1.2 million US dollars. This could be quite concerning for horse racing going forward if it does become a target of prediction markets. So some of these prediction markets currently have insufficient KYC processes. You can actually sign up with one of them without providing your name, just an email address. An email address, deposit in a cryptocurrency, and start betting. And given that they offer lay betting, there's a real integrity risk to sport and horse racing. There's a very high risk that these operators do not really understand our sport or other sports. Do they know who the licensed persons are? Do they know the betting rules? This all needs to be properly monitored and have correct reporting structures in place to the sport and to horse racing. So the National College Association of Athletes in the United States have raised concern about this. That's no surprise there. There is a risk that these types of markets will provide effectively be a playground for those who want to make money from betting with inside information, who want to make money by corrupting sports and potentially horse racing. So what struck me with this, though, was it very much felt like 25 years ago in Britain, where the betting exchanges hit the UK betting market. The regulator at the time was simply not ready for lay betting, and it caused some major headlines. Today's risk, though, is potentially more complex. There are multiple prediction markets. The use of cryptocurrencies make the investigations, the audit trails, far more complicated than what they would have been in the past. The integrity challenges are not unique to a single racing jurisdiction or a single local jurisdiction, but are now global. Well, what are the possible solutions to this? The legal market must compete. It must compete in terms of price and product. I'm going to state the obvious here, but jurisdictions with a strong tote system and minimum bet guarantees allowing customers on will, of course, be more resilient. Countries with poor customer value or restrictions on customers risk a quick migration to cryptocurrency, sportsbooks, and prediction markets. Racing authorities need to be aware of the betting integrity threat. They need to be ready to start monitoring this type of activity. Understand what the threat is, understand the bet type, monitor it, and act upon it by communicating this information in real time to their race day stewards so they can take action if suspicious betting activity was to take place. For the gambling regulator, maintain strict enforcement, blacklist and domain block if they're not legal in your jurisdiction. That's especially critical for prediction markets and cryptocurrency exchanges, which rely so heavily on that public recreational money. Once they've got that money, you get the professional money in. And another one for the gambling regulator is to improve customer clarity. Let's make it very clear which websites are legal and those which are illegal. That's everything for me for now. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Luca Esposito, and today I'm representing the World Lottery Association, and thanks for the tip, Martin, about the name of the association. We've been working on that. But it's not as easy as, believe me, it could look like. Sorry for my nasal voice. I wasn't with Tom yesterday. First of all, and also apologize for my Italian accent. So ChatGPT told me that I should speak with my hands, but I said probably it's too much of an Italian. But anyhow, so who do I represent? So the World Lottery Association. So before we start and to share with you what we do in terms of fighting against illegal, I would like to say a few words about the association. So we are an association not for profit, representing more than 160 members around the world. And there are two main criteria, so let's say, to become a member of the association. One is that the vast majority, that's what you alluded before, of the profits go back to the community. So, but also that they need to provide services in accordance to the local laws. So in our code of conduct from 1999, it's clearly stated that to be a member, and you need to respect that, otherwise we can expulse that operator from the association, they need to provide services to users, players, where they have a license to operate. It is effectively in accordance with the Macolan Convention from 2019, September 2019. So that's, I think it's quite important. And to give some figures about that, so last year, more than 110 billions were given back to the society. Give an example, I live in Switzerland. In Switzerland, 60% of the budget for the National Olympic Committees comes from the lottery. 60%. It means that grassroots is at risk. Scholarship in the US are at risk. So that's what this community does, this association and the members of the association do for our community. Having said that, as you can imagine, and it has been very well presented before by Martin and Tom, the illegal operators pose a big risk for our community. It's probably one of the most important challenges that we have in front of us for the years to come. So we, as an association, we provide the services to our members. We have two world-class certifications on responsible gaming and on security. For us, being certified responsible gaming is not like a compliance check, but this is rooted into the DNA of the lotteries. So the well-being of players, it's part of our mantra. So it's not a compliance check. And that's why we believe that a responsible offer, it's the only offer that will exist in the future. But we have to raise also awareness about what is happening. And here we have some examples of how we should combat illegal betting. But before to go into the rules and that could apply, we have defined 7 golden rules for that. We started with the definition. We need to define what is legal and what is illegal. And for that, we use the Macolan Convention that really allows us to clearly elaborate on that. But then also, we did an analysis on the business model that are behind. Private operators, semi-private operators, how they do business in the various jurisdictions. So really the framework, not only the legal, political, social, but also the business model counts a lot into that. And having created those definitions, which are all, by the way, available, and we'll share the presentation through our website, allows to set the stage and to say, okay, clearly what is legal and what is not. Because for us, there is no gray area. For us, they are all legal or they are illegal. Because you can be legal in several jurisdictions, but it's enough that this company provides services in a jurisdiction where they don't have a license to operate, and for us, they are an illegal operator. So, in regards to the topic of the size of the legal market, there was mentioned before by Winfried the 1.7 trillion. That is the estimation that comes from UNODC. So we believe that it is quite important to do an estimation of the size of the legal market, not just to have a figure, so whatever is the figure, but just to, again, raise awareness about that, especially for policy making, especially for regulators. So we wanted them to understand what is happening in their jurisdictions. And for that, we are supporting on work from the University of Lausanne, so it's an academic approach. It is based on artificial intelligence because we wanted to have a top-down approach, and because of the scalability of this approach. And we have behind the project several organizations, so UNODC is part of that, Interpol is part of that. We have several companies that are into the area of estimating in general the size of the legal market. So the idea is to come up with a model which will allow us to understand what is the size of the legal market worldwide, but also in each jurisdiction of interest. And this will, again, help, in our opinion, to generate awareness about what is happening in various jurisdictions. Also, recently, just to show, that we'll look at everything that is happening in terms of illegal, we created a position paper on bulk sales. Bulk sales is when certain companies decide to buy into bulk combination for, it could be a sports event, but it could be also for a lottery, just because they want to win the jackpot, to hit the jackpot. But it's done in a way that is, first of all, not fair and doesn't allow the same probability of winning to any players. And so for that, we created this position paper to alert, especially the policy making, when they create games, that they need to pay attention to several aspects of the games. Other things that we do, it is, best practices. We did some guidelines with the help of some of our members, which are also some are here in this room, on horse racing. So how to promote sports betting, how to promote horse racing in a responsible way. It's quite important because, as I said before, for us, the responsible play, responsible gaming, it is at the heart of what we do. It is in the DNA of the members of our association. But also a brief guide on the Council of Europe Convention, because we believe that sponsoring this convention, it is important for the world community, because this helps also raise awareness about the risks that various governments, policymakers are taking in their jurisdictions. And of course, as a part of the fight against illegal betting and also on the fight against match manipulation, the WLA is a co-founder of ULIS, which is United Lotteries for the Integrity in Sports. And that's also how, thanks to that organization, how we support sports, but also how we support the fight against match manipulations. And we do this in collaboration with several organizations. Vincent Van is here, so we work very closely with UEFA, but also with other sports organizations, the International Olympic Committee, CONMEBOL, FIFA. With in France, we are here, so we work with the league. So we have a contact with the league from France of football, where we do the monitoring. We do not only monitoring the competition, but also the risk management part of that. So really making sure and public available to operators what is at risk when we bet on an event. And with that, it is all for this brief presentation. I don't want to take much time. I think it's quite important to have such a Q&A session where we will give the possibility to all of you to ask questions. And I mean, I will be available, and I'm sure that Martin will have questions for us.
I'm very pleased to say that Rishi is going to have a little break. He has a cigarette and a glass of red wine over there, because when you're in France, then do as the French do. No, thank you. We're going to have a bit of a discussion. We all know each other quite well, as you may have guessed. So we have a discussion that I hope will be quite smooth. And we're going to come to questions from the audience as well. We have plenty of time for this. So we will open it up quite soon. I hope there'll be something from as many of you as possible. Rishi and I do have a little bet about who will ask the most questions and who will ask the first question. But I won't tell you that bet, because it's the odds are changing rapidly, and we have to close the book, actually. But first I'd like to introduce Vincent Venn from UEFA, previously FIFA. Vincent, I've had the privilege of taking part in Vincent's UEFA Fight the Fix training program, which I think is the best integrity training program I've seen in any sport, and really was an inspiration for me. So I'm very pleased that the IFHA is supporting UEFA. We take part in their training, presenting on illegal betting. But I'd also point out that in the UEFA training, Vincent and his team schedule an entire day to talk about illegal betting in this course that lasts for, was it 2 weeks, Fight the Fix?
It's actually 6 months.
6 months?
6 months long, but okay. I can elaborate a bit more later on.
So it really, it was an eye-opener for me about the interest in betting markets from those operating other sports, and the commitment that they're making to understanding betting markets, how they're impacting sports. So Vincent, we'd like to start with you first, because you didn't present. So we've heard from Brandt, Tom, Luca about illegal betting and the impact on integrity, the response from racing authorities to this threat. But as you know, the biggest betting sport in the world is football, not racing. Actually, all sports are betting sports, right? So there's no people used to say racing is just a betting sport. It's nonsense. All sports are betting sports. So how do you approach this from UEFA? You have the biggest betting markets in the world on your sport. You have these huge threats to integrity. We see the cases. How do you see this from UEFA? How do you react to it? And how do you intend to go about combating the betting threats to integrity in the future? Over to you.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon, everyone. Just one point before I jumped into the substance of the matter. Just don't want to apologize for my French accent, but because we're actually in France. And second point, just want to say thank you as well for the invitation. And just to clarify the point, that Martin has not been rude to me. He has offered me the chance to have a presentation. But I said that it was not necessarily appropriate to bombard the audience just before the closing words of this excellent chairman as well, and with football content. I thought that would be much nicer just to have, a fluid conversation, something smooth, something nice, just to have in a casual way. So now when it comes to match fixing in football, integrity threat, etc., I was thinking, why am I actually invited to that panel, horse racing? Even my wife came to me, she was like, you invited in a horse racing event, a conference, but are you now an expert in there? And I tried to reflect as well, why am I there? And maybe it's because we are sharing the same challenges, we are sharing the same attention from the public, the same expectations, and I believe that we have the same responsibilities. And what happened in football, Basically, of course, there's no doubt that it's been years that integrity, anti-match fixing has been a concern for football, and we're always serious about it. But I believe that it's actually even more true nowadays in the 5-6 last years, because we basically we're asking ourselves, okay, what can we do better? What are the actual threats? Illegal betting, definitely a threat, of course. But betting, generally speaking, as well in football, you know that UEFA had a very conservative approach for years. It was a bit different maybe in the UK as well. But as a sport governing body, we understood that we needed to take our responsibilities. But it was really the moment we couldn't hide behind, behind the media, behind people, and just say, okay, no, that's not happening, etc. Because what I say usually to people is that integrity measures are like an insurance. An insurance before something happens, and then it would have very severe consequences. So what we have done is that we developed a new strategy based on focal points in our 55 in our 55 member associations. We heard this morning we are on the same boat. We have to do something about it. We should not be competitors, but we should collaborate together. And that's actually exactly the same what we're saying as well in football conferences. That we need to stop, being competitors, this mistrust between association to association, and have a real community. And I think that after now 5-6 years, we managed to do that. Just to give a stop to this mistrust and to start working together. So we have put together a team of 10 experts at UEFA. Back in the days, it was 1 or 2 persons working on anti-match fixing matters, but now it's 10 of us. And our responsibility is basically to support our national associations. Support, basically, in which way? So basically, our strategy is based on 3 pillars, very simple: prevention and awareness, monitoring and intelligence, and investigation. So we are financing the activities. It's more than 4 million euros, up to 4 million euros that we are giving to our association to develop specifically on anti-match fixing. And that's actually quite unique, in my opinion. And as you said, we are putting a lot of efforts as well in prevention, in education, in awareness, etc., etc., etc. But I'm sure that we'll be able to talk much more about it in the next minutes.
That's a very brief overview of a lot of work, and having seen Vincent and his colleagues in action, I can assure you it is a really extensive program. But perhaps could you just elaborate on a little bit more of that, which I think is of particular interest to us, and that's collaboration with public authorities, government policymakers, maybe not necessarily gambling regulators from the perspective of UEFA, but other public authorities. I mean, for example, I know you work closely with Guy Rembrandt, the Belgian gendarmerie. It's just one small example, and he's very passionate about anti-match fixing. Could you tell us a little bit, what do you do with public authorities, which public authorities in Europe, and what's the importance of that?
Yeah, the second question right away for me, just need to brief a bit. Yeah, and I'm ready for that. No, but as you can see, we were very close with different different stakeholders, different people. It can be actually domestically, but also on the international dimension. So when it comes to the collaboration with law enforcement, obviously we have that relationship with Interpol, Europol, etc. But as well with specific law enforcement agencies, the ones that that maybe have the most knowledge as well, that have a certain expertise, and are looking at actually at these issues, because obviously it happens in many countries that match fixing, integrity in sport is not on top of the agenda. So firstly, we basically need to raise awareness among these authorities, and that's what also we are doing together with Luca from WLA, where we try to have that approach at policy-making body, at governing body, something that we need to act. When it comes to investigations per se, why is it that important to work with law enforcement and public authorities? It's for basically 3 main reasons. The first one is that we are sport, we have strong regulations. Some sports have strong regulations. At UEFA, I believe that our regulations are quite good, but we don't have the state power to investigate. So whenever we open investigation, perhaps based on a ULIS report, an ULIS alert coming from the lotteries, thanks, Lucas, by the way, it's very highly appreciated. And at that moment, what we can do, we can obviously summon the players, the referees, or whoever is actually under our umbrella, question them, etc., take some measures. But at some point, there's our limits, obviously. We don't have the state power to investigate. So that's the first point. The second one is the standard of proof that is actually applied in criminal investigation, in criminal law. That's actually beyond reasonable doubt, and in sport is the comfortable satisfaction. Meaning that in a certain way, if in front of a criminal court it does not, let's say the threshold is not met, we, sport, could potentially take action. This is why we would need to work together with law enforcement, them to understand our word, our need, and to have that constant exchange of information. And I think that there's quite a long way to go, and to make sure that we really have a harmonized approach. The first aspect is actually the fact that I actually missed it. What was it? But maybe Luca can complement my answer. No, we said that it should be something a bit dynamic, right? So that would be the first aspect from law enforcement. How can they help us?
Thanks for launching the hot potatoes over here. I appreciate very much. No, I think probably to complement what you're saying, it's the possibility, first of all, also to support those other organizations, because we're talking about the law enforcement agency. But most of the time, first of all, they don't have the experience, the knowledge, but not because they don't have, because they don't want to have it, just because they have so many other things to deal with that much fixing, much manipulation is not their first priority. And it's where we can help and support in raising awareness, in creating knowledge for them to understand what should happen when an investigation of this case is in place. So that's the kind of support that we can provide. But to finish on that, I think the value is that when everybody, the full ecosystem works together. The sports organization, integrity bodies, law enforcement agencies, clubs, operators, and so on. When all we work together, that's when tangible result can happen.
Luca, if I may jump in, that's exactly why we're working together, because you had the third point that I wanted to address, is that we all have one piece of the puzzle. And that puzzle is very important. Obviously, law enforcement have certain intelligence regarding to criminal networks. We actually have some expertise to bring to law enforcement as well. Lotteries have as well. I'm sure the British horse racing authorities, you actually also have that specific expertise to explain the case, to bring up the case to criminal courts as well, to all people that are actually interested in you.
This is actually European football midfielders at their best. They pass the ball beautifully between each other. It's very smooth. But now I think we cut across to Brandt, because I wanted to use the points about government interaction and dealing with the authorities for Brandt as well, because you talked about what you're doing in the UK, but obviously all of you know, I think that Brandt is a leading light in the European Federation of Horse Racing Authorities as well, and a good example for them. So Brandt, without going back into UK, how do you see these problems developing in other countries? Are they the same problems? Are they similar? And what are the challenges that other authorities face?
They are the same, Martin. And interestingly, earlier this year, our European Federation had our General Assembly in Merano in Italy. And we had heard about the Italian government's commitment to returning Italy back to its former racing glory, because it has a very proud history in horse racing. But betting in that country had been challenged over many years now, and we were advised that there were changes to the taxation regime that were coming into place this year. And just as I finished this session a moment ago, one of my Italian colleagues just mentioned, since those changes have come into effect, in the last 2 months, turnover on betting on racing in Italy is up 16 and 13%. Now, this segues through to that point I raised around the unintended consequences of interventions. Increasing taxes actually has the opposite effect in terms of increasing taxation revenue for governments. And that's an example of where a more progressive approach, putting in place tax advantages for the racing industry, will lead to increased taxation returns because turnover is increasing. And so it's creating a more favourable environment, regulated environment for players. It still provides the protections, generates increasing tax returns, and supports the local industry. And I think that's a wonderful example here in Europe of where the government is doing the right thing by supporting the sport in that way.
It's very interesting to see that leaders in racing understand these social policy and fiscal questions quite clearly. So I think there's also a question of interacting with other sports and helping them to engage with governments on similar questions. So cutting back to Tom, you didn't go in today to bet monitoring, and I know the origin of your career is really bet monitoring. I would say you're one of the leading experts in the world in racing bet monitoring, certainly, and all sports bet monitoring. But we've talked before about how other racing authorities can conduct bet monitoring, how other sports can conduct bet monitoring. Could you talk a bit about the challenges of that, not just in racing, but across all sports, and also what's happening with the solutions that are being offered for bet monitoring, and any worries you might have about that, about how that ecosystem is developing?
Sorry, excuse me. I think with bet monitoring, it really is about defining or making very clear what the value it provides to sports and racing. And there is a huge amount of benefit, particularly for racing authorities, to have betting expertise in-house, understanding what the betting integrity threat, so that might be the different types of core operators or different bet types bet on their sport, but also what the illegal market are offering too. So just being aware, what are the key integrity threats to the sport? I think there's a huge opportunity, and I'll come on to the value side now, of what racing can do with, I guess, a modern-day betting analyst who comes with a high skill in data. So it's not just a case of just going through looking at market movements. It's doing much more than that. So you can combine not just a big betting data set, but you can look at performance as well in a very similar way. Are there any unusual performances which stand out, which can be automatically flagged? So just combining that betting data with performance data. So it might be a case, and I'll use the Hong Kong Jockey Club model as an example, where if a jockey had a 5% rate of being slowly to leave the starting stalls 1 month, the next month that's up to 40%. That's automatically flagged. It's flagged as an alert that is then cross-referenced with, for the Hong Kong Jockey Club, the illegal market data. Were there any notable or potentially irregular-sized layoffers on that horse on the illegal market? So it really is looking at both betting data and performance data, looking at emerging trends. That would be a definition of an emerging trend on that slowly away one. The other one you'd look at is those individual incidents. Has a jockey set the first sectional time of being exceptionally fast, which has given that horse little chance of actually finishing the race? Well, if that happened, that should be flagged. Should be flagged and then cross-referenced with the betting market. So there's value in terms of using betting analysts to develop that performance side as well as the betting data. It provides real value in terms of obviously protecting the reputation of the sport, putting the sport on the front foot, but also then potentially supporting other data projects in an organisation. That could be integrity related, or it could be other data projects such as horse population modelling, which those new betting analysts would have. We obviously the IFHA Council produced the bet monitoring report last year, and I think it's actually in the document on the table, and everyone's got a copy.
Actually, Tom Chignall produced the bet monitoring report, I should point out. It was very good.
Who's the gentleman?
Yes, go on.
And I think in that you can just take three, if you're going to set up some sort of bet monitoring, there are three key areas. One is growing that betting intelligence as much as possible, speaking to all different types of organisations or human sources, but really being open-minded to growing that betting intelligence. Second one, have some intelligence-led bet monitoring. Focus on those key markets which come with the highest risk, the highest integrity risk. And the third is then having that manual assessment, those experts in place to then assess those automated flags and be in a position to then communicate that to the racing stewards on race day to help protect the reputation of the sport, as I go back to, but also put it on the front foot. So if something comes up in a horse race, it's not identified on social media by commentators. So I think there is real value in having that betting expertise in-house.
Luca, you didn't say much about ULEZ, and maybe that's a good opportunity to go from bet monitoring to Tom, to you, because it really impressed me so much. 30 sports. How do you do that across 30 sports? How do you develop that expertise?
Yeah, I mean, that was also one of the challenges, and I think it was a perfect assist from Tom, going back to the midfielders, is that, we said we have to grow, not only in terms of capacity, in terms of number of sports, and that's what we did, but also in terms of intelligence, so how you do the analysis of all those data. And we said, of course, we believe that humans is at the center of that. You can't just rely on technology and on artificial intelligence, because there is an expertise which is quite important, because it's really, in my opinion, the big discriminator in this case. But we said we need to have artificial intelligence in our platform, because otherwise it would not be impossible to expand to what you said, more than 30 sports, almost 900,000 events per year. But we rely a lot on our human capacity and on the expertise that we have. Of course, the tool will simplify, will help us in determine the risks that we have on certain events. But the human part, it's as important as the rest. It's one of the things that we do in terms of ULEZ, but there are two other key pillars that we have. One which is the racing awareness and training. So I was referring before to the work that we do with the law enforcement agencies. So only in Europe we have been in 27 states. More than 300 law enforcement agencies have been trained by us. But also racing awareness with public authorities. We believe that it's quite important for the extent that we can do. And the third pillar, not in order of importance, is the stakeholder engagement. It's going back to what we said before, is really to have this possibility to partner with the like-minded organizations, because it's only like that in our opinion, we can tackle such a transnational phenomenon, which is, the fight against illegal betting.
I think at that point, I'd like to open up questions from the floor. Anyone like to jump in?
We are ready.
I'm going to show you competition manipulation in action. This is so I'm closing the book on the first question, which is going to V. Moodley. Now that looks quite innocent, of course, but over to you, V.
Thank you very much, Martin and the team. Martin, so first and foremost, I'd like to compliment us as a racing industry in diagnosing the problem. So I think that was the first step in solving a problem, is to diagnose a problem, which we've done well. And then the next step, I think we've achieved in knowing what the solution is. So in Brent's presentation, I believe the issue we have now is educating the regulator. That is our stumbling block. There is a knowledge deficit, And the challenge we have, so for brand to go the route of X the racing tax, that means it's not winning with them. So I think that's our new challenge now. We've done well in diagnosis. We know the solution. The new challenge today is we were slack in educating the regulator or the policymaker. Now we come to a point where it's crisis mode. We're in crisis mode. Then the other gentleman touched on, they also have their own issues to play besides the horse racing factor. So the question is, how do we go about accelerating the education of the regulators or the policymakers? That is our stumbling block. Maybe Brian can answer that.
Thanks,
Thank
V.
you.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think first and foremost, and I touched on it in my presentation, the work that the council have undertaken over many years now is starting to gain momentum. And for us, we saw a very clear sign of this just last week. We've been working hard to help policy and decision makers understand these challenges. And it was quite timely, I thought, that our gambling minister, Baroness Twycross, who we've been working closely with to help understand not just the gambling sphere in horse racing, but all the wonderful benefits that we bring. And some of our colleagues here today have hosted her at racing events over recent months. But at an event during the Labor Party conference last week in Liverpool, she specifically made reference to the risk of increased taxes leading to a migration of players across to unregulated black unlicensed markets, and recognising that there is that balance to be struck and a tipping point. So I think the answer to the question is it is a constant job that we all need to do, all of us, A, to understand the problems ourselves. You know, we owe it to our sport, our wonderful sport, to do that. But secondly, to continue to educate and inform those that are ultimately making the decisions that have the effect on us.
Can I just pick up, sorry to hog the mic, but just picking up on what V said and what Brian's saying. Luke, you mentioned it in your presentation as well. The well-being of the players, the wagering players, is crucial because ultimately the implementation of affordability checks, for example, have been had a huge effect on the sport. And picking up on what everyone's been saying so far in this question area, how do we stop reacting to what the government does? Can't we have a foothold in what the government does? Can't we be part of the consultation process? Can't we have somebody involved in when they have an issue, when the government and an election's coming up and they're creating a manifesto and Labour want to introduce affordability checks because they're concerned? Why don't they come to us and say, can you help us do that? Why is there a disconnect between what they do and what we do when it affects us so hugely?
So, look, I mean, Rishi, it's an excellent point, and I think it highlights the need for us to dedicate resources and energy to helping officials understand, governments understand our sport more. You know, I think in terms of your point around engaging in that consultation with government, I think there's an increasing level of collaboration globally on that very point over the last number of years in terms of trying to address the issue of the migration to black markets. I know many in this room, including us, have put in submissions to support the Hong Kong Jockey Club's efforts to expand simulcasting and providing markets for basketball wagering, for example, to combat that growing risk. And similarly, knowing that the Council and the IFHA have put in submissions to government in support of our position. So I think it is about collaborating, working together, continuing to get that message across and engage with governments as we do it.
Perhaps I can just add to that, Rishi, because it's a very good question. and I don't speak for the Federation, but I think Andrew and Winfried might agree. Obviously, the Federation tries not to engage with stakeholders in governments in each country on issues like this, because it's the role of a racing authority or any other sports authority in each respective country. So I think we have a role from this particular group to support racing authorities in doing that. All racing authorities obviously are challenged with a huge number of issues, as we've seen at all of the conferences in the past few years. So I think getting ahead of the curve, as you said, and being proactive to engage with governments is challenging, but going back to V's question, is probably the next step. Rather than reacting to changes in government policy, be they tax or be they gambling regulations, ideally, as Brant's been doing in the UK, and I know many others are doing, racing authorities would be proactively engaging with governments to propose what we know from this global sharing and collaboration.
Just to follow up on Luca's point, and I'll direct it at you, Luca, if that's okay. You mentioned about, again, the well-being. When you take a gambler, a punter, someone who's wagering, and you want to stop them because they have triggered, say, affordability checks, you use the phrase, I mean, GamStop is one of the organizations that you mentioned earlier on. It's all they do. They go, stop gambling. But you specify by saying the use of the word well-being. If you just stop what someone from doing from something, which is, if it's drinking, taking drugs, or gambling, if you want to put it in that context, then that's all you're doing as a sport. Shouldn't we have a duty of care to the people that wager on our sport to do more than that, to try and identify what it is that they have the issue with and help them to take the next step to well-being, as opposed to saying, right, you've gambled too much, stop gambling?
Okay. Yes, thanks for the question, and that's a very good one. First of all, I would like to say that in the industry that I specifically represent, there is the highest percentage of artificial intelligence which is used to identify behaviors within the players that could be at risk. So to stop them before. We have several examples that I can share of members that they do that. Another caveat is that, as Martin said, this applies also to the World Lottery Association. We normally don't deal with the governments directly, except if they ask us. Because, again, it's a conflict of interest. It could be seen as a conflict of interest, right? Being here representing members, for instance, here in France, PMU, and then talking to the governments. If the government asks, we go with pleasure. But for that, we really act on a reactive way, but with credibility, in the sense we based everything on facts. So we don't have nice statements. It's not saying for the sake of saying. We have very well prepared studies, data, research, which are there, are available, but we only provide the support when we are asked for. Give a concrete example. Exactly 5 weeks ago, because it was quite interesting, the presentation for Latin America, because also from a lottery perspective, we see exactly the same thing. In Chile, they're changing the law. There we have been asked to provide our feedback. But we would not normally go and say, oh, we know that you're doing that, why you don't consult us? But there we go, and we present exactly the state of art of what could be beneficial for them. Because there is not one size fits all in any of the industries we're here. But we do the analysis based on what is their market, their social reality, what they do, and we provide the best practice that we believe will be most effective for their jurisdiction. And sorry, to go back to your question, yes, of course we can stop, we can present the information, but then it's about the policymakers, it's the regulators, because especially if a regulator wants to give away, and I'm not about being a sole license operator, or monopoly, or a 50 license, then the responsibility is also shift back to the regulator. It's about the regulator to make sure that if they get an alert from us that that player should not take a bet in any other website, they should make sure that this happens. So it's...
And any more questions?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Chairman.
We spend in racing a lot of time to educate, especially sports and young apprentices, about integrity and values. So what is the approach in soccer and to nurture and get a understanding how integrity plays a key role? It would be good to see what I think programs are currently underway and to understand if there are even ways of collaboration between what we do in the racing side and what we can do with other sports.
I assume that this question is for me, right?
That was clear.
Thank you, Chair.
I think with the UAE.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no pressure, right? I'm representing a country and an organization, right? Both. Excellent. No, that's a very pertinent question. It goes back to what I said. We need to take our responsibilities, and we have established together with our 55 integrity officers. So maybe it might not have been clear at the very beginning because we are working with each of our national associations. There's one single point of contact that is responsible for integrity matters and to deliver their own integrity initiative at national level. There's an entire and very comprehensive program when it comes to education. So all of these integrity officers are responsible before, for example, U17, U20, men's and women Euros, before actually the actual competition, to brief their entire team and the entire delegation. What is actually being said there? It's basically how to recognize a threat, an integrity threat, how, for example, someone could be approached to fix matches, but as well, there are issues like betting addiction that are being touched upon, illegal betting, etc., etc. So that's something that we do from a top-down approach. At our level, obviously, before any senior Euro, that is actually man or woman, we do exactly the same with all referees and actually with all delegations. For example, in 2024, every single player that participated in a competition had a minimum 10-minute briefing on integrity matters in sports, and as well there were a few slides on illegal betting. Just one point, just if I may come back to the point from the gentleman down there, what would be the solution to fight against illegal betting? I don't believe that it's the sports that can actually make a difference. But what we are doing is that supporting the work of the Council of Europe, but I believe that is doing quite a good job in the area. As actually Luca mentioned it, through the Macolin Convention, and that way as well, they were the first one to come up, in my opinion, with a convincing definition of what is illegal betting, really regulated, and making the difference between the regulated and unregulated markets. So I think that's also a very good platform for different stakeholders, including the operator, sports, and the regulator, to talk and to discuss different issues like possibly tax issues, etc., etc.
I was going to say, perhaps we can elaborate on Macolin Convention a little bit.
Yeah, before the Macolin Convention, also on the training, we believe that the training it's quite important. There are, for instance, there is an example here in France, but also from Germany for North Rhine-Westphalia, where they're supporting, it's a project here in France as well, but there as well, it's 1 million euro that is giving for education of the kids in school. Because now the issues with the gaming as well, because you know about the loot boxes and the possibility that kids now have in each game to buy skins and for the sake of advancing during the game. But this, we've done an analysis with a psychologist that it creates already the attitude that buying something, betting on something, it's quite natural. So there are certain projects in terms of education that are sponsored by the lotteries, which we believe are quite important to start as early as possible to try to prevent certain things to happen later on, or at least not to give for granted that you can bet on a website which is not official just because it is proposed while you are playing gaming on a certain specific platform. And to go back to the part of the Macolin Convention, I mean, we are proudly observer of the Magolan Convention as a EULIS, so we participate actively to that. We support them because we believe also that not only for the definition itself, but for the capacity building that can help us to create, especially on reasonable betting and on fight against illegal betting. You know, the possibility that they have, it also through them to go to policymaker and explain the difference of what an operator is, what an operator can do, and probably have different stages of operators, because there may be operators that act legally everywhere that they have a license, but it's not applied to all the operators around the world. That's, I think, it's quite an important information that has to be shared with the regulators, that when they give out the license, the due diligence should not happen all in the jurisdiction where they're applying for the license or where the headquarters is, but everywhere they are operating.
I think that goes back to your question as well, Rishi, about how can authorities or the federations proactively persuade governments? It's quite difficult perhaps to go to government policymakers and regulators, for example, from the BHA, because I presume their first question is, well, you have a vested interest in this. You just want more money from the levy and from gambling companies. But utilizing those international organizations has a value. And if we go to government policymakers, gambling regulators, and say, here is our contact from the Council of Europe, the Mackinac Convention, they would like to talk about this situation, it's somewhat more convincing. So again, coming back to those partnerships, collaboration, that's what helps us convince governments of the problems we face. And I don't want to let the European midfielders settle back any further. Are there any more questions before we close? I want to finish in time, perhaps, if that's all right, Rishi, so everyone would like a glass of wine or something. But if there are no more questions, then I'd really like to thank all of my colleagues, 3 colleagues from the IFHA Council, and Vincent from UEFA, who's one of our friends and partners, all subject matter experts who I think we can learn much from. And thanks to Rishi. If I could hand back to you for the next part. Thank you.